one of the things that strikes me the most when I travel around the world and talk to people, and especially people from rich countries, from developed countries, is that they seem to be uninformed about the state of the world. And despite that, poverty rates, extreme poverty rates, nearly halved since 1990. The vast majority of people think that poverty has either increased or remained the same. There was a poll last year conducted by Localities, and they asked people what they believed had happened with extreme global poverty in the last 20 years. And these are the results. And as you'll see, in India and China, in those countries that actually saw the greatest improvement in extreme poverty rates, saw the greatest, or expressed the greatest optimism about poverty rates. Whereas if we move to developed countries like the United States, like Germany, people had little idea about the amount of progress that the world has done in the last years. And this the improvement for the poorest of the poor. My colleagues at the Cato Institute developed a tool called Your Life in Numbers that lets you explore how the world changed since you were born. So I was born in Argentina. And I was born in Argentina in 1990. And since I was born, this is how indicators improved in my home country. As you'll see, everything virtually improved in all areas of life, starting from life expectancy, infant survival, food supply, income per capita, mean years of schooling, and I could go on and on and on. But what about other countries like Sub-Saharan Africa, for example? Well, had I been born in Mozambique, this improvement would have been way more dramatic, and people still don't realize it. But so far we have discussed indicators in modern times. But what if we go further back? Let's say as back as year 1. So what we see here is that things were pretty stagnant until the 19th century, where we see this explosion of wealth, starting mainly in the Western world and then spreading all around the world thanks to the era of globalization. Just to have an idea, in 1800, the vast majority of the population was extremely poor. Even the richest countries at that time suffered from extreme poverty. The world's income per capita at that time in the 1800s was the equivalent of Mozambique's income per capita today. So, how did this happen? You might call it a miracle. Yeah, but I'd rather call it the Enlightenment. And you probably heard about Adam Smith, John Locke, David Hume, Thomas Hobbes, Francis Bacon, just to name one of the few and most important thinkers of the age of reason, of the Enlightenment. And what their main concern was not how wealth is redistributed, but how wealth comes to exist in the first place. So they focused their studies on the benefits of a strong rule of law, on the benefits of having well-defined property rights, the benefits of protecting civil rights and civil liberties as well, the benefits of free trade, freedom of movement, internal and international, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. So it was thanks to this miracle, the Enlightenment, that we've seen this improvement in all areas of life. And this miracle has not only made the world richer, it has also made it safer, healthier, and wiser as well. Yet, we can find people complaining about the unjust state of the world. But let me walk you through the counter-argument. For the first time in human history, in the past 50 years, the absolute number of people living in extreme poverty has been reduced for the first time in 50 years. And in 1800s, again, there were roughly 1 billion people on planet Earth, right? Of those, 94% lived in extreme poverty. What are those figures today? Well, those figures have reversed. And today, 90% of the world's population do not live in extreme poverty. And this is an incredible amount of progress if you just take a minute to think about it. And every 60 seconds that I'm here talking to you about human progress and about how the world has improved, 100 people climb the ladder out of poverty. But the average human is not only making more money with time, we are also living longer. And it looks like since 1820, we've done something right when it comes to nutrition, lifestyle, health. In 1850, there was no country with a life expectancy longer than 40 years. Today, there's no country with a life expectancy shorter than 40 years. These are the figures for life expectancy by region for 1770. These are the figures for 2015. All of the regions doubled their life expectancy in that period of time. Even Asia almost tripled it. Here's the global literacy rate. In 1950, only half the population could read or write. Just like take a few seconds and look around you, and look at the people that surround you. If you divided this auditorium in two groups, one half would be illiterate, and the other half would have been literate in 1950. Today, almost 80% can read or write. 80% of the world population can read or write. Yet, again, we see people complaining about the patriarchy, talking about sexism, talking about the wage gap. But in fact, in many, many areas of life, women, we even have it better than men. Life expectancy, because we live longer than men. Thus, the mortality rates for women are lower. We're less likely to die than our male peers. And if you take a look at the wage gap for the OECD countries, you'll see a continuous decline since 1970. And this narrowing in the gender gap is a consequence of technological innovations. And these technological innovations that were brought about market forces liberated women from spending an excessive amount of hours fulfilling domestic roles. Can you believe that in 1890, 90% of American women baked their own bread? 90%. And in 1910, US households spent 6 hours a day cooking their meals. I love cooking, but I could never spend 6 hours a day. So these technological innovations freed women. Today, with grocery delivery services, they bring you food to your doorstep with a touch of a button. And all these improvements have not only taken place for men, because as we see, women have benefited as well. So, still, our view of the world is either pessimistic or uninformed. More people believe in ghosts and UFOs than they believe in progress. When I follow the news, I get terrified, because I think that the world is literally falling apart. And the reason I'm talking to you today is because that is not the case at all. Just to give you an example, in 2014, this Russian outlet decided to report positive news to its readers for an entire day. One of the headlines read, "No disruptions on the roads despite the snow." Can you guess what happened? This Russian outlet lost 2/3 of its readership that day. 2/3. Only because they reported good news, positive news. Have you ever read a headline like this one before? Raise your hand if you have. Neither have I. So it seems that bad news sells. If it bleeds, it leads, they say. An airplane accident, I bet that an airplane accident is news. But 40 million of flights landing safely every week, that is not news. So it seems that we're fascinated by fear. We're fascinated by fear. And this is a genetic predisposition. So we tend to pay attention, we pay actually attention to what may impose a threat on our survival. But the problem is that politically speaking, this sense of threat, this pessimism, is very dangerous. Very dangerous, because political leaders usually build their careers on a fear narrative. Fear is the health of the state. And these politicians will try to do whatever they can just to protect us from those threats by any means, being those threats real or not. They will disrupt international trade. They will ban immigration. They will impose higher taxes to try to end inequality. In fact, they will try to put an end to what has ultimately made the world a better place for everyone. Have you ever heard this joke? If con is the contrary of progress, then what's the contrary of... Sorry, if con is a contrary of pro, then what's the contrary of progress? Exactly, Congress. So why is progress important? It's important because it means that we can do more things than before. We can create more, we innovate more, we do more things with the resources that we have at our disposal. We even satisfy more of our ambitions and needs. And humanity has made incredible strides in all areas of life throughout the last hundreds of years. Illiteracy, hunger, poverty, you name it. And as Franklin Roosevelt once said, the only thing that we actually have to fear, that is fear itself. There's no reason to think that this progress will not continue. The human brain, the ultimate resource, as Julian Simon once said, is capable of solving complex problems. And as we face those complex problems, if we use history, the last 200 years, as a guide, we must be and can be confident that humanity will always find a way. Thank you.